Well, welcome everyone to our sixth committee vodcast, a series of conversations with Strata experts about how to build effective committees. The focus of our conversation will be around the human factors rather than the legal requirements. That's our legal disclaimer. We invite you to pop in any questions in the chat as we're going through. And if we don't get to them today, then we collate all of those and we'll introduce them into our future committee conversations. Joining us today is Nicholas Abbey with experience from large multi-layer subdivision, and Catherine Leeser with experience of multi-storey apartment living in no less than 15 different strata apartments. So a wonderful lot of experience there, and with a particular passion for sustainability. Catherine also is the first lot owner to become president of SCA Western Australia. So welcome to the two of you. So far we've explored with Catherine and Nick why people volunteer to be on a committee, their experience of joining a committee, what are the most important steps for a committee to do from day one, and managing your manager. Recapping, there were 5 important steps that came out of this session. And the first was building relationships with the manager and the committee. The second was creating a work plan for the year, the action list to be achieved. The third was creating handover from outgoing committee to incoming committee. The fourth, keeping communication open and transparent. And the fifth was recruitment and induction pack for committee, one from the strata manager and one from the chair. So again, welcome back, Catherine and Nick, and thank you for giving up your time again to share your experiences and your knowledge with us today. I will mention that all of our past vodcasts are available on our webpage, so that you can listen to those again if you missed those wonderful sessions on all of those that we've unpacked so far. And what we did promise was that we would unpack each one of those as we went through on our monthly vodcast. So today we're up to the last one, which is recruitment and induction packs for committee from the strata manager and the chairperson. One of our last top 5 steps previously discussed was the importance of creating handover from the last committee to the new committee to ensure that projects that were already underway were continued seamlessly, and also getting everyone on the same page about, where we were up to and where we're going. Whereas induction in this what we're going to talk about is a slightly different step. Because we know that a lot of committee members, while they put their hand up to come onto committee, don't actually know anything about the owners corporation either from a legal framework perspective or from that human side, about what their role or their job is. So induction is a very important part. Now, I know from our previous discussions that Nick thinks strategically, and his induction will include, I'm sure, things about consultation and linking it to the OC strategic plan. And Christine's induction will relate, I think, more to logistics, consultations and projects, and kind of in that action format of where we're currently at. From my experience of working with committees, I have seen the chairperson at the first meeting, for example, say to the new committee, let's make a list of how we want to work together. What are our strengths? And, these are the key jobs that we have to, roles that we have to manage, things like finance, risk, projects, community, and how will we share that workload? And, voila, a committee charter is born, as well as a number of subcommittees and, that kind of thing. Whereas from my perspective as the strata manager now supporting my committees, my induction pack talks more to that legal framework of the committee operations, functions and obligations, the history, again, more around those functions and obligations, like if we'd been taken to VCAT and failed on something or, whatever. Policies, of course, that have been created, the strata manager being the record keeper would be the one who would have all of those policies in a file somewhere, the roles and responsibilities as documented in legislation, and where documents are stored and what they and all of that sort of process. So, you know, coming at this from all those angles is kind of the conversation that we're going to have around today. So, Nick, I'll start with you to just see, what does induction look like in your OC? Knowing that you've been part of the big OC and that you're currently now involved with one of the limited OCs of that. So you've had two lots of experiences there, one with large lots of responsibilities and one with not so many large responsibilities. Is the induction process different based on how complex or big the committee is to, you know, from one to the other?
Thanks, Julie, and hi, Catherine, again, and it's lovely to be with the people as part of this podcast. Induction, do we do it well? I have to say that I can't proudly proclaim that I've been associated with a benchmark around induction. It continues to be a work in progress. It continues to be a struggle, partly because we're all time poor. Often we don't invest sufficient time up front to do induction well, but I still have some thoughts about it for what they're worth. Look, we need to be realistic, of course, and it depends on the size of the OC, as you pointed out. Sometimes it's much easier to manage induction within a smaller OC, given the levels of interaction amongst committee members within a particular OC than across a large OC. It obviously underpins the work of every committee, or ought to, that members have all the information they need to perform their role. It also creates, importantly, a more level playing field for new members if they can effectively engage with members with greater experience. And that asymmetry or even power imbalance on committees is to the detriment of people developing their own shared collective wisdom, obviously. When I see it, when I've been associated with induction that's been done well, and it should be taken so seriously. So I'm qualifying my, you know, just how well we may have done it historically. The committee and manager should have agreed previously what the induction should cover, what documentation should be provided as part of the induction. Ideally, it's online by way of a documents repository as well. And if a manager has a portal, that is wonderful, where all the key documents can be stored for committee members. New members should obviously receive or have ready access to a copy of the model rules or their own rules, a link to the Owners Corporation or strata legislation. And as you said, Julie, outlining the roles and functions, but also pushing the boundaries, not being mechanistic about that. You know, like what can committees and OCs do within the context, within the parameters of the legislation. And some managers do that very well as to how they make it very clear as to what you can and can't do without being mechanical about it. Obviously, annual report, financial statements, minutes of at least the previous committee meetings for the past year, the maintenance plan, other relevant documents that sometimes you don't find on a portal or haven't been stored as part of a documents repository, such as a safety audit, an inspection, a risk assessment, and of course, a code of conduct if it exists. Just some other comments though. The documents that provide insights into the key community issues and what the OC is working on and towards include, if it exists, an OC strategic plan, or at least its action plan for the year or 2 years, a copy of a survey, a community survey of lot owners, and anything else like that that actually tells the story about what the OC is focusing on and what it hopes to achieve over time. Now, that's a lot to digest, and the manager's role is therefore pivotal in guiding and supporting an understanding of the legislation and its practical implications for your owners corporation. And I think that in the first meeting, when I've seen it done well, both the manager and the chairperson discuss the practical implications for the owners corporation and the committee of the rules, the budget, strategic plan, if there is one, and other key documents. Final point is this: there is, of course, a lot of learning through the doing. So it's ongoing, and I'd like to say something about this perhaps a bit later on. But Induction is ongoing rather than being an isolated one-off event. Suffice it to say now that induction is more effective when a committee, a manager, and lot owners are strongly linked to each other. If a committee is not a secret society, if it has an e-news, for example, even if that's just information dot points occasionally in emails to lot owners, or participates in a lot owners forum, such as a community Facebook page, or has done a community survey, or invites lot owners to suggest items for committee meetings and reports back to lot owners through a brief e-news, obviously a new committee member will already know about the committee's work and be better placed to contribute to meetings as a community member, not only as a committee member narrowly defined.
Yeah, interesting. Catherine, now I'm going to throw to you exactly the same question, but I know from our previous conversations, as I've mentioned, you've been in 15 different stratas and your experience has been totally different to Nick's experience and that sort of, governance and leadership that has been, through what we're hearing all the time from his wonderful experience, and yours has been totally different. So I am very interested to hear how induction has been, given that you've got such a sample of 15 different buildings.
Yes. I've got my current building, the induction there is no induction. And in fact, as I was handing over, I was the previous treasurer and I wanted to hand over to the new treasurer. And I suggested to the entire committee, I've got a handover document, I'm ready. And the secretary said, you don't need it. If the new treasurer wants to know anything, they can just ask the strata manager. So it was a very different attitude in this current building. But the practical things, especially in these tall high-rise buildings, one of the best things to do for induction is to do a tour of the building. Because generally speaking, you live in your building, you have no concept about the plant rooms, the lift rooms, all of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on. And just understanding your assets is a huge thing. So a building tour is the first thing that I asked for when I move into any building or become an owner. And even if other people don't go, it doesn't matter. But I think a building tour is a huge, important thing. And Nick's point is great, but of course not everyone learns by reading, or not everyone's got the time to read everything. So I still think treasurer should get together with outgoing treasurer and so on to pass on some of that knowledge. I think that's really, really helpful. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a huge amount of time, but I think, just sitting an hour, treasurer to treasurer or secretary to secretary can just help so much, smooth so much of the work, so the new person doesn't have to find all of the same documents all over again. It takes you basically 6 months to get up to speed with a building if you know nothing. I think you can short circuit it to a month if you get a good handover, for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just picking up on that same point about not everybody reads or has the time to read the volume of documents and stuff that would be part of, let's say, my induction pack that goes over. Yes, it's like 15 pages. It could be longer depending on how complex the building is. And of course, not everyone will have the time to go through that. It's there, they can go and look at it if they need it. But of course, if they've never opened it, they don't know when they're going to need it. And you mentioned that the tour of the building is really important. So is that, and Nick, from your perspective as well, is induction now something that should be a sort of a more face-to-face, like a formal, I don't mean formal in the sense of, I mean more in a conversational like this as a Zoom meeting, and you step them through something about where to find stuff, what's on the portal, what the portal looks like, so rather than read it all, take them on a visual journey.
I think it's a combination. Some people know their strengths and weaknesses, they do. So I've had people say to me, I don't want to come on the committee because there's just too much reading. Well, okay, if you don't like reading, great, we'll deal with it in a different way, but we could really do with your skills on the committee because you know about X. There was one guy on my committee who loved looking after the pool. That was his domain. He was the pool guy. He was happy to oversee the pool testing and make sure the chemicals were good and everything, but didn't want to read anything. But it was brilliant to have him on the committee because we needed that skill set, you know. So, yeah, I think it's just a mixture.
Yeah. Do you think videos work? Are they a substitute for, think of the building, you know, that building induction, if you like, the tour of the building? Would it mean the same if it was a video that you watched that took you around the building versus walking around the building?
I don't know. Let me try. I'll do one. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
You know, it's just, again, it's just out there. It's about how, you know, thinking of efficient and effective committees, how could we improve that induction and handover kind of idea as well? But certainly that idea of being able to show them what they are ultimately responsible for, rather than, you know, otherwise is just shown as a dress, as the premises. Yeah.
Can I also just say here that when I've seen this done well, it's often because of the manager's prompting, and the manager's made it clear in a respectful way that can we actually schedule half a day for the whole committee, and we can look ahead at the committee's work for the year. We can do a SWOT analysis, you know, just, you know, so every committee member is able to discuss the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the challenges. If you have a strategic plan, you can discuss that as well, and what that might mean for our work for the year and for, you know, the 12 months and beyond. It often is and sometimes I get it, committee members may not be receptive to that, but when a manager very gently, respectfully, but strongly suggests that it's a good idea at the beginning of the year to spend some time together offline, in a sense, where we're not looking at the business of the day, and this may not be relevant to all OCs and smaller OCs, it really makes a difference. It sets the frame for conversations and mutual understanding and what we can achieve together in a practical sense.
So you see it more, that's interesting, Nick. I mean, but again, I've sort of, mostly my committees have been high functioning committees, and that role has always been done by the chairperson, not I mean, you know, the strata manager supports, as I said, in more that the legal framework and everything like that. But so you see, but I guess, I suppose, if you've got a chairperson that is not of that, doesn't understand that, or not of that experience, I guess, you know, that, I mean, I guess I've been lucky. I've worked with people who automatically take on that leadership role. So it's where there is that leadership is not there. You're suggesting then that the strata manager could fill that role?
Well, they can be a catalyst for it. They can facilitate that process and emphasise its importance. Having said that, the best induction we've all seen is when the chairperson with some experience, presumably, and the manager, they co-facilitate the induction session. So whether it's of an hour's duration, or ideally of half a day or some hours duration, and it's a matter of going through the key documents and understanding roles and responsibilities as per legislation, as well as what's our action plan for the year. Let's work on that in a practical sense, our work plan for the year. It works particularly well when there's synergy between the chairperson and the manager, and of course facilitating that.
Oh, exactly. And if the committee's been a total changeover, then the manager is the only constant thing in that. So it would make sense for the manager to take a lead when there's a complete change of the committee.
Interesting. Can I just say something, Julie? I heard there was a building I came across here in Perth that they hired a lawyer. So they made sure in their budget every year there was a $300 amount to hire a lawyer to come in and do an induction session with the new committee every single year after the AGM. And I thought that was really interesting, because you've got a real legal background, you know, somebody who's really trained in strata law to give a bit of an induction on the legal side of things for all the committees. So I thought that was a really interesting way to handle it too.
Yes.
Of course, there are different legal opinions, and I strongly endorse that, mobilising any professional expertise to support the understanding of committee members. But as we also know, some legal opinions can serve to narrow down a committee's focus and work. Other legal opinions serve to gently expand a committee's work to become more community-centric. So that's one aspect that needs to be considered. But I totally agree. For many OCs, that can be a wonderful way to provide induction at a professional level.
So yeah, I agree. Catherine, with your experience of 15 different strata managers, did you actually see any in any of those 15? Was there any of this sort of leadership that we're talking about in terms of when, say, a new committee comes on, that the manager filled that induction / training in some way, even if it wasn't as broad or wide as we're saying? Or has it always been that the committee was sort of left to their own devices? It's their job.
The most I've seen is a code of conduct discussion. Other than that, no. It's pretty much driven by the chair, and in some cases, it's actually been driven by a very engaged building manager.
Okay.
He's taken a lot of ownership. Yeah.
A new player on the block. Yeah. Very interesting, very interesting. Well, still continuing our theme around induction, but looking at it a little more broadly now. Committee churn is one of our big, one of our big challenges. Either recruiting in the first place through or before the AGM, ready to bring them on. So recruitment is one part of the conversation. But then when you have committee members resign, throughout the year, and you've then got, it's about that process then about how do you fill those vacant positions, not from a legal perspective. We know the legislation prescribes how that's done. It's more, how do we go about filling those positions? And then, induction. So they're coming in midstream. They weren't part of what was that first meeting that got everybody on the bus and got everyone excited and heading off in the same direction. They've come in, midway through. And so what does induction look like for them? Is that a different, a different kind of a process, or exactly the same process? And how do you then make them feel welcome? So Nick, do you want to start with that one? Have you had much? Is that something you experienced, or are your people that, in your experience, committees have stayed the full term year to year and they never leave? Or
hey, look, there are two extremes, aren't there? Committees with a high turnover, and therefore, they become, committees can either be too stable or you have high turnover. And if you have high turnover, of course, much of the corporate and local community knowledge or memory may be lost. If the committee turnover is low, the opportunities for increasing community diversity and bringing on board fresh perspectives may be limited. I think, again, if a committee is not a secret society and it's relating well to lot owners, and for that matter, tenants, if a committee communicates with the community about its decisions and actions and invites suggestions for agenda items and reports back to lot owners through a brief e-news, for example, lot owners will just have more knowledge to begin with and may be more likely to have an interest in joining the committee. Simple things such as, is the committee visible within the community? Are there contact details, as I've always said, for at least the chairperson provided? The community issues identified in a survey of lot owners can serve to promote participation in a committee. It may prompt some lot owners to join a committee. Such issues as identified in surveys may include common property garden maintenance or plans for future improvement, whether it's solar panels, community bulk purchasing, or it might be local traffic management issues, etc., or community events, or as Catherine said, the person who's interested particularly in the pool. If you know your lot owners through a survey, you can identify areas of skill and knowledge and interest, which may be the quickest way to join in the committee, or at least a team or a working group, which may be the first step to becoming involved in the committee. And also about AGMs, I've always emphasised the covering letter for AGM materials, because this is when, you hope to get new committee members. The covering letter for AGM material should be invitational and community focused, with an emphasis on how lot owners can participate and contribute, bearing in mind that some AGMs for lot owners can still be perceived rightly or wrongly as to some extent perfunctory and bureaucratic box ticking and the approval of preset motions, rather than being a forum for real conversation and considering the issues that matter to lot owners and residents. So, of course, there is the business of the day at an AGM, but if it's only that, and it's not an opportunity for people to think about the issues and challenges or make suggestions and to inform the committee's work plan, well, they may be less inclined, of course, to become involved.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a great idea, the invitation, because my experience has been people are reticent to speak up at the AGMs. And anyone who does speak up, they'd be the people I'd be tapping on the shoulder to fill any vacancies, because it's a big deal. They're obviously passionate enough about whatever to speak up at an AGM. I would also invite them to try before they buy. You know, there's no reason why people can't come to a couple of committee meetings or a meeting before they commit to coming on the committee. That's no problems. But I think to your point, Julie, about, okay, we're not all on the same bus. I think it's valuable to have somebody start in the middle, because they can actually have fresh eyes, So if you've got somebody who's passionate enough to come involved in the building and, volunteer their time, you want to tap into what they're thinking as well, not just make them think the same way as the rest of the committee. So, yeah, I think, we have often, I don't think I've ever had a moment where we have had nobody fill a vacancy. I think there's always somebody we can find somehow. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And Nick, I agree. The AGM, particularly from the strata manager's perspective, is all about box ticking and rolling it over, because it's a business meeting. It's not seen as that community and social focus meeting. Of course, an owners corporation can have as many meetings as it likes. It only has to have one AGM. That's the statutory requirement. But I think and I just think, people don't realise that they can have other meetings that serve other purposes. And that may be in one of my larger schemes. That's something that, I'm talking with the committees now about is doing exactly that. Let's have town hall meetings, have it before the box ticking AGM, so that people have a chance to come, free speech, forum, whatever, no formal motions, but let's get together and, chew the fat about whatever the key issues are, which then may form the business to be decided at the AGM as well. But
strongly agree, Julie. And with our experience, for example, traffic management and road safety, there were major issues in our community. We had many residents involved in that. We were liaising with local government. In the end, a significant sum of money was invested by local government in largely resolving the problems and the issues within our community, and by way, in terms of traffic management issues. But that happened because, as the chairperson, I was facilitating, as you say, almost like town hall meetings, and many of those people then later joined the committee as well, because they saw that there was now a nexus between the issues that mattered to lot owners and residents and the work of the committee. Now, it may mean that the committee was just creating opportunities for those conversations to take place, rather than where it was deemed to be the core business of an owners corporation committee. But it was creating those opportunities. And then with the AGM, just simply having a covering letter that made it very clear that, yes, you'll see various attached documents, and there's the business of the day, and there were financial and other reports, etc. However, we would make it clear that there will also be various community issues discussed. So someone would have been asked beforehand who'll be reporting back on the traffic management and road safety progress as a community issue at the AGM. And you then find that the AGM becomes a place of conversation, of dialogue, rather than, where many people may be sitting there silently and voting on those preset motions, which are important. I'm not posing one against the other, but it also means an opening up gently of a conversational space so that people feel comfortable talking about the issues and the practical possibilities that matter to lot owners and residents.
Yeah, I think that's important. I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to say that in you know, in all the states I've lived in strata, there's a tendency to just do the minimum, which is what's legislated. But there's so much more that you can do, you know, and high functioning ones like Nick's talking about, of course, are doing more than just the one AGM a year.
I agree. You know, the legislation is the lowest bar possible, and it's what everybody's striving to deliver. So, you know, go figure. So, yes, you're right. We are out of time. Gee, time goes quickly, doesn't it? One of the things I thought we might explore next month was that we have talked a lot all the way through our vodcasts about surveys and the importance of surveys. And I thought that from, you know, our shared experiences that I have done my first one. And yeah, exactly. And it would be interesting to share the outcomes, but also just that journey of understanding, you know, whether to use opinion questions or whether to use scaled questions. What sort of questions do I need to, like, how do I frame the question to get the kind of answer that either fits a scaled or that is an opinion? Like, so there was a huge learning just on going through this. And then what do you do with the results? And what is it telling me? What, you know, etc. So I thought that might be a good one, because we talk about it all the time. It's not as easy as it sounds, but once having unpacked it and done it, then you're set and you're off and you know what you're doing. So what do you think about that? You're going to join me in a month's time?
Absolutely. That sounds great.
I'll do my best.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, Catherine and Nick, for your time today and sharing. And thank you to everyone who joined us today for the committee podcast. The session has been recorded and it will be uploaded. Thank you. See you next month.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.